Assalamu alaikum. There was a recent video that Yasir Qadhi put out that I wanted to provide a reaction to. And I think that this video is very noteworthy because Sheikh Yasir Qadhi is putting out basically his underlying views about the Islamic tradition and about his approach to Islam, fiqh, tafsir, basically any of the ulum, any of the Islamic sciences. He's giving his attitude and it's very revealing what he says. I think it's noteworthy, and I just wanted to put a quick reaction just to note some of these points that he brings up.
Majority opinion, even if it's said by giants, should not matter to a true researcher and a...
So, an opinion that's brought up, even when it's coming from giants in the Islamic tradition, it shouldn't matter to a true researcher.
A true academic. We have
a true researcher, a true academic. Okay?
To understand that the way that our ummah is currently set up, scholarship by and large consists of regurgitating and memorizing. It does not consist of challenging. It does not consist of being brave enough to break away from the paradigm. Frankly,
so this is a belittling of the Islamic tradition, and he says that most of the scholarship today, if not all, of the scholarly work is just regurgitation and memorization, and there's no one brave enough to challenge those ways of thought and the things that are just memorized and regurgitated. This is his attitude. Let's see what he says.
If a Deobandi has studied, 10, 15, 20 years in his institute, or an Azhari or a Medina guy, and then they dare break away from the standard narrative, as you are aware, that comes with a lot of baggage and a lot of tension. It's very difficult to do that. And my argument is very straightforward. So what if a lot of people said something? It doesn't make it right.
So what if a lot of people say something? It doesn't make it right. This is completely contrary to the usul in Islam, where we go from the Quran and then the Sunnah and then ijma'. Ijma', meaning consensus, is a very important part. It's one of the usul, an asl of the deen, because what people have said, what ulama have said, what the righteous have said and done in our history is a proof, is evidence. But what he's saying here, what Yasir Qadhi is saying here, it diminishes that, dismisses that.
Correct opinion is independent of the names of men and the quantity of the names of men. And that is also a very important point. I mean, again, if you
emphasize the quantity, it doesn't matter how many people have said something, that this is the truth, the correct Islamic position is X, Y, or Z. It doesn't matter how many people have said that or what major scholars have held that position. If you're a true academic and a true researcher like Yasir Qadhi, then it shouldn't matter to you. This is what he is promoting. So isn't this, this is an attack on basically all of the traditional learning that's happening by Muslims in the world today. If you're a talib al-ilm and you have a sheikh in a madrasa, or you are studying at Azhar, in Masjid Azhar or in Medina, you're basically just memorizing and regurgitating, and probably you're not going to be brave enough like the sheikh here to question and to challenge and to get to the truth of the matter, which is something that has no bearing on the quantity, the number of scholars and ulama of history that have held a certain position.
Study intellectual history, and again, this is something I want my students to do. The majority opinion typically is based upon socio-political factors. Simple as that. I'll just lay it out there.
Wow, I mean, this is really extreme, saying that the dominant position is based on social and political factors. This is exactly what modernists say. This is exactly what reformists say, because they have to justify why the majority of ulama on any given issue held the position that they did that contradicts a liberal narrative, a feminist narrative, a secular narrative. So they undermined that tradition by saying that their understanding of the haqq was not based on the actual Quran and the Sunnah and the correct understanding of that. It was based on social and political factors. And we have different social and political factors now in this day and age, so we are just as justified as they were in determining what is the correct position. You think that women cannot lead prayers? Well, guess what? That view is based on a majority, but that doesn't matter. We can revisit the Quran and Sunnah given our social and political circumstance and determine what is actually the truth. Maybe women can lead men in prayer, for example, or on issues of LGBT, or issues of inheritance, or any of the ahkam of the Sharia.
Dominant madhab, the dominant firqa that is common in a time and place, has nothing to do with truth as it comes from Allah. It has to do more with the socio-political context, with the kings and the rulers, with the prime ministers, with the institutes that they sponsor. This is the reality. You know, the Ghaznavid sponsored the Karramiyya for a period of time. The entire region was Karramiyya. The Hanbalites were powerful in 4th century Baghdad. The Seljuks came and they brought in Ash'arism, and because of a particular instance, which inshallah we will talk about in one day, Ash'arism became the dominant strand for many centuries. It remained the dominant strand. Socio-political factors has nothing to do with the haqq being from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we can understand this for trends, if we can understand this for firaq and movements, we have to be brave enough to say individual opinions as well can be influenced by, look, you know, if you're in an environment where 99% of your teachers are on one position and you're not challenged to think about that position, you will absorb that position and move on. That's the way the world works. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But the fact that 99% of your teachers say something doesn't mean it is the correct truth. It's just that's that school, and they are taught a certain philosophy, and they're taught a certain, whether it's aqidah, whether it's fiqh, whether it is a position like Ismail and Ishaq. The fact that you have not heard contrary, and all the mashayikh you study with have not heard contrary, means nothing, because in the end of the day, every firqa and every trend is basically within a spectrum of opinion. Very few people are brave enough or foolish enough, depending on how you want to look at it, because it comes with cons when you break away, right? To go outside the box and think for themselves, like, okay.
Look, again, everything that he's saying here and doing, he's just priming the audience to accept this kind of reformist mentality. It doesn't matter. All of these opinions, all of these rulings that we find in the Islamic tradition, they were limited to a madhab, right? They were all limited. His criticism applies to the entire Islamic tradition, because all of these different schools of fiqh, all of the schools of aqidah, they were in a particular time, in a particular place, with a segment of scholars and ulama, and he's saying it doesn't even matter if they were the majority. Even if they were the majority, quantity doesn't matter. They are just the product of their environment, of their time and their place, and political factors. He is in one fell swoop just undermining the entire Islamic tradition.
Okay, let me do a deep dive about this particular issue. So for me, this topic.
So again, we have to do a deep dive on this particular issue. You have to be able to think freely. Okay, he makes the Islamic tradition and ulama sound like they were cowards. They weren't brave enough. They weren't true academics, and they weren't true researchers like maybe himself, who are able to question and ask, the tough questions, to look beyond their own blinders, their own school of thought. This is the type of language used by reformists. This is the type of argumentation and framing that is used by modernists. And you might think that I am exaggerating, but just read between the lines of what he says. And this video, this clip that I'm playing you, is just a small example. He has made many statements along these lines, and he's elaborated it in depth.
Is illustrative of a fact that I want every student of knowledge and potential alim and alim to be aware of, and that is that no matter who says what, that is a secondary, maybe even tertiary evidence. It is not an evidence in and of itself. The evidence of the haqq of a position and batil of a position, it transcends the quantity quantity and even the big names that said it, whether it's Ibn Taymiyyah, whether it's Al-Tabari, whether it's Al-Qurtubi, whether it's Ibn Hazm, all of this is secondary. We look at the evidences, and of course for every field they have their different evidences. But anyway, for me, this was one of the most important points that I wanted to stress via this lecture, that if you're...
See, quantity doesn't matter. Even the big names. Even the big names, if Ibn Hajar, if Imam al-Nawawi, if Imam al-Shafi'i, if Imam Malik, if they all are saying a certain thing, that's not evidence. That means nothing. If you're a true researcher, only those who are not brave enough to think for themselves are going to just accept something because Imam al-Shafi'i said it or Imam Malik said it. You're not brave enough to think independently like a true researcher.
You're an average ambi, whatnot, follow the name. Don't follow the evidence, but then know you're a muqallid. Don't refute. Don't get involved in defending the haqq, because you have no right to do that. You are following who you think is defending the haqq. But if you want to be a true...
So, if you are a layman, if you're a lay person, you don't need to defend the haqq. Just follow your, particular school and be satisfied with that. You don't need to defend the haqq.
True, bona fide, independent, any scholar, thinker, whatnot, then you're going to have to be brave enough to set aside your prejudices for or against and look at the haqq beyond the names of men. In any case, inshallah.
So if you're a true academic, you are going to be looking beyond the names of men. Maybe perhaps like Sheikh Dr. Yasir Qadhi, you don't need to follow, you're not a muqallid. So what is he saying here? Is he saying he's a mujtahid mutlaq, that it doesn't even matter if one of the four ai have a certain position? It doesn't matter. You can just transcend that and go straight to the evidences. The names of the Salaf, do those matter? Does the name of, do their positions matter? Because he said it doesn't matter how big the name, and it doesn't matter the quantity. If there is ijma' on an issue, well, that's still a product of a particular time and place. And we have to be true researchers and go beyond that. So this is something that's very subversive. Let's see what else he says.
Inshallah, I hope that was of some benefit. And by the way, this does apply to all of these refutations going on as well, because if you look at it, the majority, if not, I would say 99% of the people that are involved in this social media debacle, frankly, they are not independent thinkers. They're complete muqallids. They think they're defending the truth because their version of the truth is a very simplified, reified, ossified, hand me down, hand it to you in a slogan, and then that's it. Anybody comes along and distorts or from their perspective or thinks outside or whatnot, they can't handle it. They can't handle the truth, right?
So I don't know which social media debacle he's talking about. There's been so many that he's involved with, whether it was his interview with Muhammad Hijab, where he's making these foolish statements about the Quran, or whether it was his recent clip that came out where he's saying that the hudud and the sharia are bizarre and problematic. Okay, actually saying that about the sharia, or whether it was his defense of Omar Soleiman involved in this kind of kufr shirk ritual with LGBT priestesses. Which debacle? There's been so many that he's been involved with, and these are all issues that are clear cut, and you don't need to be a mujtahid like certain people, I guess, like Yasir Qadhi, to be able to criticize those things or to be able to understand where the haqq lies. But this is how he is shielding himself, how Yasir Qadhi shields himself and his chosen friends from criticism, because Muslims, when they hear this nonsense, whether they're scholar, imam, or just awam, they're going to be angry and they're going to react with outrage that how can you be saying this, how can you have this position, how can you be promoting this? And Yasir Qadhi is trying to preemptively shut people up, shut them down. No, you have no right to criticize. You're just following an ossified, fossilized, whatever else he said, tradition. You are a blind follower. You can't understand. Yeah, I'll admit I am a blind follower. Yes, I follow the ulama, I follow my teachers, I follow the scholarly tradition, and I don't want to be quote unquote independently minded if that means to violate what has clearly been expressed in the Quran and Sunnah and reiterated and affirmed with ijma' and the scholarly tradition. So those who are in this kind of delusional state that they don't think they're muqallid, they don't think that they have to follow ulama, they can just have their independent opinion as if they are mujtahid mutlaq. Okay, they don't have to care about what Imam Ahmad said or Imam Abu Hanifa said. Let them be following these kinds of delusions and see where that leads them.
That was a classic line. But they're not able to handle it because their wavelength is not capable of digesting that somebody can be beyond their narrow spectrum or bandwidth. And in any case, inshallah, this lecture has shown you a number of things. Most importantly, how easy it is for a majority position to change, so much so that something that would have been a majority in early Islam is now considered to be completely almost heretical in our time frame. And this is...
What example is there of something that was the majority and is now considered or later considered heretical? His lecture was about the question of whether Ibrahim alayhi salam was going to sacrifice one son Ismail or Ishaq. And he mentioned how there was a difference of opinion on which son of Ibrahim alayhi salam was going to be sacrificed. This is not something heretical. This is not an issue where there's an aqidah debate. So why is he invoking this word of heresy? He's making this ikhtilaf much larger than it is. So what examples are there where the majority of scholars of a period believed something and then the majority of scholars later deemed those original scholars as heretics or as believing something heretical? This is a claim that needs to be investigated.
If you enjoy this type of stuff and you are serious about this type of stuff, then do think about the classes we're doing at the Islamic Seminary, because I am not familiar with any other institute that is trying to make its students while being faithful to Islam. There's plenty of places that are not faithful to Islam that want to do this type of stuff, but while...
Where is not faithful to Islam that are trying to do this stuff? Is he talking about academia? Academia that he has on many occasions praised. So they're not faithful to Islam, but they're doing the same stuff that he's doing in his seminary.
Understanding that we are, inshallah ta'ala, mainstream, Orthodox Sunni Muslims, still within the framework, wanting to challenge and wanting us to take a step back of the entire tradition, even as we respect the tradition. I don't know of any other institute, so that's a free plug there.
So they want to step back at his seminary from the tradition. They want to go beyond the tradition in order to challenge the tradition. Okay. So you can draw your own conclusions about what that means and what that is referring to and what Yasir Qadhi and his seminary are planning for the Muslim community, especially for the Muslim community in the West.